agreed at the last full council on the 1st October to meet within 14 days to determine membership of COSLA and begin the appointments to outside bodies. I'd also like to remind members that this meeting is being recorded and will be available for public listening. Could I ask you to use your microphones at all times, please, and speak clearly into the microphone, and that includes myself. Yesterday afternoon, I received a request from Councillor Scobie that I bring forward a late paper which he had produced to the council. On the distribution, it's on the distribution of the discretionary housing fund, which contained around a dozen recommendations. Obviously, it is after the 10 working days period for motions, and it's quite unrealistic to ask members, I think, to consider a paper that you haven't actually seen, and you haven't had the opportunity to obtain the relevant background information to properly consider. So I won't be accepting it today. Members, however, might be aware that the Council Discretionary Housing Fund has recently been increased to £1.6 million, and officers are already in the course of preparing reports on this for submission to the Policy and Resources Committee. The issue of the discretionary housing payments will also be the subject of a report to the next meeting of the Ad Hoc Welfare Reform Subcommittee. In those circumstances, I have told Councillor Scobie that the issues around discretionary housing benefit will be considered when members have full information at these meetings. For the information of members, for all members, the Council has been invited to present evidence to the Welfare Reform Committee of the Scottish Parliament at a meeting on the 19th of November 2013. This clashes with a meeting of our own subcommittee. It's important that our Council's views are put forward at a national level on this by both members and officers, and on that basis the subcommittee has been rescheduled to the following day, the 20th of November 2013. Okay, Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, Chair, as a reply to you, accept your explanation in terms of not taking it as an extra item of business today, given the lateness of the request. I'm pleased to see that it will go to Policy and Resources. I would hope that that could be the 5th of November as the next Policy and Resources, because there are people who are suffering out there who have been refused discretionary housing payment, and in that respect, Chair, I hope that you would agree that we take it to an early meeting of the Policy and Resources and, as you rightly say, the Welfare Reform Subcommittee for their consideration as well. Delighted to hear that we will give evidence to the Welfare Committee, because on that day I believe they are taking the issue of the Section 16 of the Housing Scotland Act and the Govern Law Centre's petition, of which this Council supports. So, pity, note that, Chair. Well done.
Thank you. If we can move on, Alex, can I ask you to take Sederunt and Apologies, please?
Thanks, Leader. There are 38 members present. I have 9 apologies. Councillor McGregor, Councillor Marshall, Councillor Peacock, Councillor Wood, Councillor Maitland, Councillor Yan, Councillor Ferguson, Councillor Stitt and Councillor McCutcheon.
Any declarations of interest? Jim? Sorry, Jim?
Yeah, thanks, Leader. It's not so much a declaration of interest, it's just notification on item 3. I retired from the local police force just about 4 years ago. However, as this is a community issue, I do not intend to be leaving the meeting.
Thank you. Before we go on, I'd just like to extend our sympathies to Jane, as I've just found out sadly our father's passed away. So I think we should all, send us condolences. Okay, moving on to item 3, the Police Scotland review of traffic wardens and public counter service provision report by Director Chief Executive Service. This report gives details of the consultation being carried out by Police Scotland on the ongoing reviews of traffic warden and public counter service provision. The Council has been asked for its feedback on the proposals being put forward by Police Scotland. The report obviously has local implications for the police stations at Kirkcudbright, Dumfries and Stewart in particular, although there are issues in relation to public counter opening times for other local police stations as well. On a more strategic point, there is a proposal from Police Scotland to withdraw traffic wardens passing responsibility for policing parking to local authorities. The figures in the report show what it would cost the Council to undertake the service at the same level, although clearly this is the minimum provision and the costs could be considerably more if we wanted to provide a region-wide service. As I understand it, any move to decriminalise parking offences and to pass responsibility to the Council would take some time, and in the meantime the onus will rest with Police Scotland and police officers to enforce the legislation. I have to say that I am personally concerned about both proposals, which come less than a fortnight after members consider the Scottish Fire and Rescue plans to close the fire control room in Dumfries. It's also no secret that the Chief Constable of Police Scotland has made it known that he believes there should also be a cut in the number of control rooms in Scotland from 10 to 3. And I know there are fears among members about the future of the police control rooms in Dumfries. We have Chief Superintendent Kate Thompson with us, and I would ask her if she wants to add anything to the report or just answer members' questions.
Leader, members of the Council, thank you for this opportunity just to say a few words. I'm probably more interested in answering your questions, but I would like to add some context round about the paper. As you're aware, Police Scotland have been asked to deliver £60 million worth of savings across all areas of policing this year. If I can reassure you that the proposals that you are considering today does not mean the closure of police stations. Those police stations will still have police officers based at the stations. What it means is the front counter will not be open to the public unless police officers are in the station and can facilitate opening it while they're working. The other point I would really like to make is that unlike some areas in Scotland who are in a different position, the reason that we've put forward these proposals are because the members of staff who worked at Dalbeattie, at Kirkcudbright particularly, were eligible for retirement and took that opportunity to retire. The young lady who worked at Newton Stewart, which has then impacted on the reduction in hours, has worked with us since she was, I don't think we have the title anymore, skill seeker, and she is now in her 30s and has decided that she wants to see a life outside Newton Stewart. So if I can reassure members that nobody here lost their job over these proposals, and nor will they, which is not a situation that's elsewhere. In terms of the opening hours, they are all laid out, they are proposals, and we are looking to consult with you, Chair, so I'm more than happy to take questions at this stage.
Thank you. I'm going to open the debate to members. Councillor Hislop.
I think this is a sort of trend that we might see getting more in the future, and I don't think it's a good trend for Dumfries and Galloway. We're a sort of rural council, and I think when you look at the closures that are being proposed for the front counter, if you take Newton Stewart for instance, it's about 30 miles to Stranraer in one direction and 20 odd miles to Castle Douglas, 30 miles to Castle Douglas in another direction. And I don't think that's good for the service that we would want to see in Dumfries and Galloway. I think what we're seeing here is sort of central belt policies being inflicted in a sort of rural area, and I would hope that we look to make sure that we do have the services that we require. One of our priorities that we had in our document, and I think it's been carried forward, is that we will not see a reduction in the service, and I would like to make sure that that is the case, that as a council we will see the services that we've had in the past retained.
Thank you. Before I go on, I think it might be helpful, I should have said this earlier, particularly, you started off with the counter issues, and I think it's important that we give both aspects a fair hearing. So rather than get them mixed up, if we can keep to the proposals for the counter service at police stations first, and then we can go into traffic wardens after that, so we can have a full debate on either, or on both of them. Sorry, Councillor Davison.
Thank you, Leader. I want to focus on Dalbeattie as one of the local members. The first question I had has potentially been answered in part because when I was looking through the figures in the Police Scotland paper, it certainly established that Dalbeattie has a comparatively low usage in terms of public inquiries and particularly core inquiries, but it's not necessarily as low in terms of its usage as some of the other police stations which are down in the consultation to retain their public counter access. So my first question, which I think has partly been answered in terms of the staffing considerations and the ERVS application, goes some way towards explaining that. I do think that point remains to some extent. Manifestly, you have a station which is somewhat more highly used in terms of public counter access than at least 2, possibly 3 of the others which are to remain open, albeit in some cases with with shorter opening hours than is currently the case. Clarification on the methodology there, I think, might be quite helpful. In a Sturgey context, for example, it appears actually that Castle Douglas actually has a lower level of public use than Dalbeattie has, and yet, for reasons of geography, etc., Castle Douglas is the one that is to remain open. What I do want to go on and to suggest is possibly considered, however, is the issue of alternative provision. I mean, in Police Scotland's paper, which is page 3 or 11, depending on which numbering you're using, it talks about seeking alternatives, whether it's with local authority, third sector groups, etc. The Town Hall in Dalbeattie, the existing customer service centre, is to be vacated in line with the Council's integration of customer service centres and libraries. I'm not entirely clear of the detail given the relatively short timescale that we've had to consider these Police Scotland proposals, but as I understand it, the infrastructure that's there, so the screens to protect staff, the disabled access, the secure doors, etc., all remain in situ in the building. I'm not sure there's any proposal to remove them. I don't think that composed part of the savings that were required for the integration. So it does strike me that there is potentially a very usable space which has the benefit of being on the high street and would therefore be quite visible and helpful. And I would like to see some consideration given to the possibility that might be used in some shape or form by Police Scotland, perhaps, to maintain some level of public access in the town. It does also have the considerable benefit of having that high street visible presence, which actually, in my view, would be something of an improvement on the current situation with the police station that we've got, which, to be honest with you, you kind of drive by, blink and you'd miss it, and is not particularly obvious to anyone that doesn't live in the town. So I'd be interested to hear particularly Police Scotland views or comments on that proposal, as well as in terms of the methodology they applied in deciding which stations should remain open, which public counters should remain open, and which should be closed. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to respond to that, Kate?
Thank you, Leader. Firstly, the methodology. When Mr Shearer was Chief Constable of Dumfries and Galloway Constabulary, I know he spoke to members frequently about the capital budget and how we made use of that capital budget to ensure that there was a spine of stations across the force that retained that local community connection. Castle Douglas was one of those at that time, and when it was presented to members, there was always talk about how we would then build in other options for some of the other stations that were not across that spine. And a lot of that was because he at that point, and I absolutely agreed with him, we must keep that local connection in local areas, which perhaps addresses Councillor Hislop's point, which is we can't have people making a massive round trip of where the stations are. So Stranraer, Newton Stewart, Castle Douglas and Dumfries are all on the A75. We have Lockerbie on the A74 and obviously Annan on the A75 as well. Now we have a number of other stations that are marked about, and what we do not want to do, and please be assured I do not want to do, is to reduce the service to the community. However, we must make savings, which is the criteria that I'm being asked to do, to make. This is not about centralisation. This is about making best use of the options available to us. Some of them will be because a lot more people contact us by phone than ever did before, and we make arrangements to see them at their own house or an agreed appointment because they are not urgent. Obviously for urgent calls, 999s, we absolutely attend where we need to attend. But the other alternatives we are very actively looking at across all areas are seizing the opportunities to do exactly what Councillor Davidson suggested, which is to work with partners and to find some of those areas of business where we can collectively be seen together. We've had conversations with and are heavily involved with the Kirkcudbright Charter Group, who are looking at community-based hubs in Kirkcudbright. And the assurance I will give you is that we will not close any police stations until we have got a viable, suitable, community-based link within those towns. So it's not as if I'm going to close Dalbeattie and have no option other than you go to Castle Douglas. We would be looking very much at what you suggest, Councillor, which is to look at some of the partner agencies, the opportunities that are there. And we have had experience before in Langham. Councillor Mail will know that the police station was slightly out of the way on the back road along Lockerbie and Bent Path. We brought that into the town hall, and actually the feedback we got from members of the public in Langham is it was far more accessible to them. It was on their route when they were doing their daily shopping. Actually they went in and they had a service. So we're trying to build on that model which actually met the community needs, and the point you make is absolutely right. Far more central and far more where you're going to get people. So we're certainly exploring those while we're looking at the proposals. Be assured that all that work's going on in the background as well.
Thank you for that. Graham? Bill? Bill?
Thanks, Leader.
Bill, sorry.
Thanks, Leader. We're in a strong group of 7 here. We've got concerns about the SNP plans to access provision centres across Dumfries and Galloway. We believe that many local communities will lose out under the Scottish Government's centralisation policies. But the sad thing, if you look at it in another angle, crime detection rates will go down in these areas. Will go down in these areas. You know, we've got a proud record of low crime rate in Dumfries and Galloway, and we should be hammering on that. If you take, for example, some public centres have got low usage. Some people don't want to make telephone calls, they don't want to write letters, they don't want to anonymous email. But the sad thing, they could be reporting a serious crime or giving over very important information to police. So we take that quite seriously, that some of these people might be disadvantaged.
Thank you for that, Councillor Bell. Councillor Nicholl and Graham.
Thank you, Leader. I'm going to speak here purely from a Newton Stewart context, and I have great reservations about the lack of hours that this counter will be open, and the fact that it's as I either said earlier on, it's 25 mile to Stranraer and 30 mile to Castle Douglas, it's thereby. And what happens if something simple like finds a wallet, a bunch of keys on the street and goes to hand it in, and you've got some poor person around about the town looking for their keys and can't find them because they're not at the police station because they can't be handed in. These are situations which we need to be looking at for the future. And if someone wants to report something, if the door is locked, will there be a way of reporting that information to the? Will there be a phone outside, or how is contact made? And I'm concerned about the possibility of a lack of community involvement in reporting things and communication that you've built up over many years. Very good communication in the Machars. And this is the only police station we've got left in the Machars. So I'm just concerned about quite a few of these things.
Kate, do you want to comment on that? Okay.
Thanks, Leader. I absolutely recognise the issue that you have, and the reduced hours, what we're trying to do is use the information that we got from the footfall survey to find out when the optimum time is to make sure that member of staff is there, to properly notify all the community in the local area of those opening times. In the interim, though, I can tell you that I have an officer who is on protected duties in that they are unable to be out patrolling for health reasons at the moment. And what we've agreed to do is that person in Newton Stewart will supplement that while we look at alternative options and work out what that solution is going to be. I absolutely acknowledge your point of view, and I know Chief Inspector Watson, who's sitting beside me, who's the area commander for that area, absolutely has that as one of his priorities, to try and look at what those alternatives are, but more importantly, to keep the community updated on how we make contact with us. In terms of a phone outside the police station, the simple answer just now is that is one of the options that we are looking at, about the viability of having some means of communication if we need that. But we would come back to you because it's not there just now, obviously, and it's just one of the things I need to look at.
Richard.
Thanks, Ronnie. Yeah. When the Justice Secretary, Kenny McCaskill, put forward his proposals, he said, he assured people in Dumfries and Galloway that there'll be no difference to the service they received on a day-to-day basis. But that's turned out now to be a sort of hollow promise. It's a political matter which you can't really comment on. It's a hollow promise because, based on the figures of the number of people that have attended Cookwoodbury, Newton Stewart and Dalbeattie over a couple of week period, there'll be about 10,000 local people affected on an annual basis. When the 3,600 people go to visit Cookwoodbury Police Station, they'll note a difference because there'll be nobody at the counter willing to speak to them. So there will be a difference. I think it's important for the police to do their job. They've got to have a good, close relationship with the public, and there's no better way of relating to the public than meeting them face to face. And this is a way, even though some of these matters might not be deemed as important to the service, the day-to-day, face-to-face work with the public is very important to solving crime and important for the relationship between the public and the police. So I think it's a backward step. Just on the survey here, maybe is there room for a breakdown of the actual complaints or reasons for going to the police? Is there a further breakdown of the statistics here of why people went to the police station?
Kate.
It does break down into core and non-core, and core is what you would expect: reporting a crime, presenting documents, getting firearms certificates signed. Non-core is going in seeking directions or anything that doesn't require a police officer to take some action or somebody with that authority. So whilst we could break it down, well, I didn't gather the information, so forgive me if I'm maybe speaking rashly. All it would separate is core duties and non-core duties in terms of why they went there. I absolutely see your point of view. My alternative solution, if I tell my alternative solution to the proposals there, are that I will put officers in the stations and I'll ask them to be present in the stations, keeping them open. But I would imagine, as members of the council, you would, as Councillor Brodie's outlined, expect those officers out on the street responding to calls and that interaction with the communities that they operate in. So there's no easy choice. It's a very hard choice of sitting in a station, because that is the only alternative that I have at the moment. And I would prefer not to, unless there was good reason, to have police officers sitting in a police station manning a public counter. unless they were doing their own work and actually they were in the station, which in that case I think it's absolutely right that they be in that station and the door open and ready to receive any members of the public that come.
Jim McComb? No? Oh, sorry.
Thanks, Leader. Several speakers have commented on how thinly spread the service counters are going to be. We're going to have a situation where between Stranraer and Dumfries there could potentially be only one service counter, a distance of some 75 miles. As admitted in the report, there are instances where it is essential to visit the service counter. How, therefore, is such business going to be conducted, other than by the individuals travelling even greater distances to access a counter? Another concern is the uncertainty with regard to civilian support staff. We've heard that no one has lost their job, but we haven't heard that anyone has ever been replaced. So that is a matter of concern, and certainly I would say with regard to serving officers, it'll be a matter for their concern as well. From the figures quoted, it's clear that limited use is now made of the service counters. Therefore, in terms of demands on staff time, it's actually not a huge imposition. What is more important, however, is the fact that the counters should be open to the public. Closure of the counters sends entirely the wrong message to the public. It indicates a force which is withdrawing from face-to-face contact, and this at a time when public cooperation is more vital than ever. In our locality, recently we've had a spate of thefts from vans and thefts from farms. Surely in such a climate, Police Scotland should be cultivating greater links with the people they are serving and not closing their doors on them.
Thank you. Do you want to comment?
I absolutely understand members' point of view, and the specific area you talk about, yes, I do know the spate of thefts you're talking about. My response would be that, and the expectation I have as Divisional Commander is, when those incidents happen, I expect our officers to attend at the sites where the incidents took place. I hope that the public, and I would have to say around about Dumfries and Galloway, we've had some fantastic calls from members of the public who have identified themselves and reported suspicious activity, and we have agreed by appointment to go and see them at their place so they don't have to make a huge round trip. And a lot of the work that we would do leading up to any changes to the arrangements is to give them the alternatives, which is not about them coming to us, but it is about us going to them while we're out on patrol. So those pieces of work will be ongoing as well. I can maybe pass to Chief Inspector Watson, who actually is the area commander for the area that you talk about, and I absolutely understand your point about distance, and that's a huge piece of work that he's dealing with just now, looking at those alternative arrangements we can put in place to make sure there's still that visibility in the community, which there is, but that it doesn't disadvantage members of the community, and we can still link in with them, but not make them do any circuitous route to try and come to us. We would go to them.
Yes, good morning. I suppose I would really just support being the area commander responsible. We rely a lot on the community feeding into ourselves, and we're grateful for that, and looking to foster the relationship that we presently have. With regards to the travelling distance, I think the Chief Super has already alluded to, we would not want to impose that on any members of the community, and certainly the work that I'll be involved with regard to the specific issues regarding Newton Stewart and the Stewartry, we're looking to put mitigating options in there that's going to reduce that. The reality is, when we take a look at how people contact the police, the majority of people phone us. We now have 101, which is a very easy number for the community to remember. We also have Facebook. We have third-party reporting outlets now working with our partners. And I suppose what we're looking to do is to build on that accessibility. The reality of the report does suggest that the traditional way, if you maybe go back a number of years, of actually going to a police station and reporting issues, that's changed. We now are in changing time. The public use and ownership of mobile phones, for an example, is a classic example of that. So even within our own area command unit, or was deemed to be our FCC, we have noticed a change in actually how people contact us, and that's more through mobile. The use of mobile phone for contact is very high. In relation to I suppose the crimes that you mentioned, I suppose the positive note I can tell you is that people have been kind of reported for those crimes, and again that's been through the good work of the officers, assisted by obviously the community. So I suppose my main message is to say to members here, and indeed the community, is that be reassured that we take the issue seriously. I'm certainly going to be working hard to make sure that the service that we deliver, the more that there is an obvious reduction in front counter opening times, that those are actually minimised so that people hopefully won't see any great diminution in the service. The strategies that we'll come up to will mean that we will make better use of our time when we're out and about, so that if it is that somebody's needing to see the police, they're always going to see the police. And I suppose that's my starting point. If somebody needs the police, they'll get to see the police. There is a reality with respect to the savings that we do need to make. And if we take that for the majority of stations, in reality, it was one core business call per day. The cost benefit of that, obviously, is obvious there for everybody, but that's not taken away from the impact that some of our councillors have made about people still wanting to engage with the police. For me, the other flip side of that is I would rather have them out visible in the community so they can have that active engagement, as opposed to sitting in an office waiting for maybe one core piece of business coming in. The way that our communication system is set up through Airwave means that we can take easy conversations from people. The actual call, if it's called into our area command room, that in itself can be put straight through to an officer that's out in the beat. So no longer do we have to tie officers to stations so that there's an ease of communication with our communities. I hope that's answered your question. If there's anything else, I'm more than happy to come back. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got John Sally, Ian Dick, Dennis Mayo, Jill, and one of the other Jims. John?
Thanks, Leader. We've just heard there about the alternative ways of communication. I've always had quite concerns about communications with the police in the more rural areas, and it's always been a thing that we've looked at. Police Scotland seem to be promoting internet, which a lot of people don't have, but my question's about the 101 number, which I've been promoting, which I thought was a good idea last year when it first came in, but I have had a couple of concerns from locals. A lot of people think this is a free number, which it isn't. Like the old number, it's chargeable. But when we're talking about using it for mobile phones, a person came to me with 2 items in the bill for phoning that came to £3.20. And this is putting people off using it. I don't know if this has been a general concern that members are aware of. I would just like to ask Kate if it is something she's aware of, and is there any way that they can reduce the charge? I mean, it must be different mobile networks and that have different charges, but it is something that's been brought to my attention that people have been put off with the charge, so they're phoning me to phone the police. So it was just Kate's thoughts on that, on, you know, are people going to be put off because of the charging, especially in times when things are a bit tight?
Kate, would you like to come in?
Councillor, I probably need to just do a little bit of background, but my understanding was it was a one-off charge, and therefore that actually seems quite excessive even for me. But if I can take that away and just do a little bit more digging and come back and report back through committee and give you an update, but I actually think that's quite excessive in terms of the calls. And the other part I would be saying is I don't have any difficulty my staff phoning back the caller. because we would have the number identification to save that money. So if they just wanted to say in the interim while I'm doing that, can you please call me back, I'm on such and such a number, then we would pick it up. But the people who set it up gave us that assurance that it was a single payment. Irvin probably knows a little bit more about it than I do.
Yeah, again, I would need to check and seek clarity. Certainly, I used to work in our Force Communication Centre. And when 101 was being talked about and being brought in, there was a charge quite regularly that would come for that. I must admit, my understanding was it was one charge regardless of the length of time you were on the phone. I would need to check unless there's maybe specific or certain mobile providers that may be actually putting a charge in there. I can't specifically say that that's not the case, but certainly my understanding was that it was a one-off fee that would be paid regardless of the length of time that you were on the phone. But certainly we can go and check and get back to you.
What comment back in, John?
I have seen one of the bills here, so I'll try and get a hold of it and I'll bring it down to Kate.
Okay, Ian?
Thanks, Leader. Just over the years, I've had numerous conversations with a senior police officer, during which he explained that very often the police are seen as a source of information of last resort, if you like, and that's borne out by the figures in the set activity ratio. My point would be that, that where there are concerns about the accessibility to the police, the ability of the public to ask the police almost about anything as, certainly in his opinion, something which improves local police and the relationships between the police and the public. And any change to accessibility, I would certainly want that to be noted that needs to be taken into account.
Okay, Dennis?
Thanks, Leader. And can I go back to something the Commander said, and that was the movement in Langham. And while, yes, the whole town appreciates and is thankful, I think that move has been made to Langham Town Hall from an outlying area. Can I ask you to turn to page 15 of 26? And what I want to say is contained in that. If you look down the list of towns there, the only one that does not have an opening time for a policeman being on duty in Langham is Langham, the only one that doesn't have that. And the problem I hear in Langham now is that if the people are trying to catch a policeman, it can be 8 o'clock in the morning or it can be 11 o'clock at night. And even if it was 3 days a week, if we could have a guaranteed sort of 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock where a policeman would be present in Langham and there, then it would certainly be helpful, because the perception is slipping back that Langham doesn't have any policemen. The nearest, they come from Annan, which is 23 miles away, and the number of times I hear the complaint that a complaint has been issued, maybe nothing serious as far as the police are concerned, but the person making it serious, and it can take 40 to 50 minutes for a policeman to arrive if they do. So if there was a contact point there, and an hour a day even for 3 days a week, where people could go and have a word with the police, it would certainly help. I just wonder if that could be considered, because Langham still harks back to the days when it did have 4 constables and a sergeant there all the time, and I still get that at community councils. So it would be nice if we could just have some presence at a specific time in the day where people would know there was somebody there.
Would you like to comment on fixed contact times?
Yes, I was one of those constables that worked there, and I would have to say, Councillor Mayor, I was hardly ever in the office other than 8 o'clock in the morning and probably 11 o'clock at night, so I apologise for that. In terms of the opening hours, we'll certainly take that away and speak to the area commander for that area, but those are the kind of options that we would look at, about having almost like surgery times that we would commit to being there, so we'll certainly take that away from this meeting.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, Leader. I have a couple of points to make, but the first point probably is to do with the recommendations on page 3, which actually uses the word consultation, and it's supposed to be Police Scotland's consultation that we're reviewing. It does sound to me as if it's a fait accompli the way everything's been discussed today, and it doesn't appear as if it's a consultation, more an information session. I would also suggest that that is the same if you look at page 7 of 26, where it says public briefing paper. It does not mention the word consultation, and everything that I've heard so far makes it sound as if actually this is exactly what's going to be happening, although we are supposed to be consulting. Also, on page 13 of 26, it mentions a number of police stations who no longer have the counter facilities, and that professional local knowledge suggests there's no reason to alter this position. Well, as a member covering the Mid and Upper Nithsdale area where Thornhill lies, I have had numerous complaints about the fact that there is no facility in Thornhill to actually have a member of the public going there. And the difficulty is when you try to phone Dumfries, it is very difficult to get a response from the number. And I have had numerous complaints about that, and I'd just like to put that on record. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we can add that in about the consultation as well, or lack of. Kate, do you want to comment on the consultation aspect and the specifics on Mid and Upper Nithsdale?
You won't be surprised to know, yes, I would quite like to. I absolutely understand the point that's been made, and the word proposed is in there. And please don't be in any doubt that this was decided by someone else. This was my decision in terms of what the proposed option was based on what I was faced with. So I absolutely take your point about how that feels for you. And it's, in my mind, it's not a fait accompli. I'm not here saying this is happening. I'm here to actually hear your points of view. The challenge is going to be how I match together all the demands that are being placed and make sure that I have a service that can actually deliver at the front end within the constraints that have been placed. So I absolutely see your point, and clearly would welcome any other feedback or more detailed feedback. In terms of the Mid and Upper Nithsdale, I suppose you have an advantage over me because I haven't received that communication or any concerns. I absolutely understand people see the police station there are police officers based there, but naturally the very rurality of Mid and Upper Nithsdale, they are on the road quite a lot of the time, but I absolutely take your point. But going back, it is a long, long time since we have ever, if we have ever had, certainly my time, ever had a public counter person at Thornhill. So in some ways to implement it now at a time where in other areas we are proposing that we don't have it would be, for me, not possible at this time. But as I say, if there was a strong enough argument in terms of demand, I would understand it. But based on the information that was known to me at the time, I didn't have the information that you clearly had presented to me.
Jill?
Thank you. Just to come back on that briefly, obviously Thornhill Police Station covers the sort of mid-Nithsdale patch. So if somebody drives 20 minutes from Money Ive area to Thornhill, expecting to see a police person in some shape or form, then, you know, you're either, once you get that far, you're either making the decision to move to Sanquhar or to go to Dumfries, and again you're another 20 odd minutes in both directions. So it is particularly difficult, and I think the general public do have an assumption that there's still a police presence in Thornhill, and that's what's causing the issue. There is a number for people to call, but it's not particularly helpful when you don't get a response from the other end.
Sorry, Leader, can I just answer? I'd be really disappointed if they didn't get an answer. I'd like to know some of those cases when they come in, so I would ask anybody to notify me of that. And I probably just would revisit the point I made to Councillor Nicholl, which is we will look at all alternatives to make sure that the community are aware of what's there, and also what facilities are at the police station if they get there and there is no officers there. So we will be looking at that too for every station, not merely the ones that look like significant changes to the proposals in this paper.
Sorry, just one more point. Obviously, I'm just picking it up because you've used it, or not you personally, but on page 13, it's actually given us an example of good working practice, more or less. So that's why I'm picking it up, really.
Thank you. Councillor McClung.
Yeah, thanks, Leader. I've got a couple of points. The counters where it's proposed that there will no longer be support staff actually doing the counter work. I know from very personal knowledge that the members of the support staff that actually man these counters also carried out various other roles within the offices for the smooth running of the office and the administration. If those counters aren't open, who's going to be doing that now? Because you're saying that you're not going to replace the staff that have either retired or left. As regarding Castle Douglas, the comment that's made in the paper on page 12 is that, however, due to the geography of the division, the station is being proposed to be reclassified as a Category C station, 0800 to 1800, 7 hours a day. 7 days a week. Taking the geography argument, Castle Douglas is about as far from Dumfries as what Newton Stewart is from Stranraer. So the argument for geography would then say that Newton Stewart should still have a counter staff as well. I am aware that your friends in the Ayrshire division are also closing Girvan Police Office, so you're now going to be faced in travelling the 75 or the 77 of your nearest police office from Stranraer either being in Ayr or being in Castle Douglas. One's 55 mile away, the other one's 60 odd mile away, and the amount of travellers that travel those two roads, personally, I think police offices should have counter staff, especially the one in Newton Stewart, because it is, as you say, our previous Chief Constable and our last one at Dumfries and Galloway said there had to be a spine of offices in Dumfries and Galloway, which included Newton Stewart, which is on the A75.
Thank you. I'll bring Kate in on this.
In terms of the other duties, which I'll cover first, as I said at the beginning, there's a number of areas of police business in terms of police staff roles that are actually being reviewed, not purely front counters. And a lot of it is about how we build that administrative backroom function based on what we have just now, and those pieces of work are ongoing. We've had to take consideration of the slightly different setup we had in Dumfries and Galloway, that the members of staff who work at front counters don't just wait for members of the public coming in. They actually cover other duties, which, as you well know, they do a myriad of other duties, and we are having to manage that change at the moment while those other reviews are ongoing, and staff are being consulted all the time in relation to them to discuss proposals, to discuss the way forward, and then to make sure that that service is delivered. But it is going to look slightly different from the backroom function than where it looks just now from the existing service. I absolutely take your point about the comments in there about the geography of the area, and Castle Douglas and Newton Stewart's points, and there are certainly areas that we will go away and have a look at in terms of it. But in some respects, Castle Douglas having a wider kind of spread of contact, I'm happy to probably have some discussions about that. However, there is a reason why it's kind of Stranraer, Castle Douglas, Dumfries and Annan are seen as the main stations. Newton Stewart has a limited through flow, but Councillor, I will take forward your points, and we will revisit and look at in a longer term the issues around about Newton Stewart and the times that they are open.
Thank you. Back in.
Yeah, thanks, Leader. Again, using my personal knowledge of 4 years ago, the support staff didn't only do a myriad of other jobs, they also did jobs that were put on them by senior officers for administration, that surveys, etc., that had to be done. Now, if senior officers are still going to be asking those kind of things to be carried out at police offices, if you haven't got a civilian member of support staff there, who's going to do it? That would be a police officer.
Okay, Councillor Krause, yeah.
Thanks, Leader. I suppose the question that's burning away in the back of my mind, taking on board whatever he's been saying, Kate mentioned at the beginning that £60 million worth of savings to be had. It's not within the report. I'm not in the Police, Fire and Rescue Committee. So is that an actual revenue saving? I assume that is a revenue saving. And what's the proportionality in regards to Dumfries and Galloway compared to the rest of Scotland? If you take the previous boundaries, what were there at the time with the different police authorities, are we getting a fair share? Are we getting an overburden of trying to take on this share? And what does it look like in the future? Haven't seen that either. That's one other point. This is okay now, it's the first tranche, you could say, of savings. What does it mean 2, 3, 4 years' time as they keep coming in?
Kate?
If I can assure you, there's no real proportionality in terms of here's the cut that you have to make. It had to be based on business, and I think if you'd put in you've got to save X amount, I might actually have found that even more difficult if you looked at proportionality. So in some respects, this has tried to be much more pragmatic approach to it in terms of what I was faced with. You only need to look at the national newspapers to see that some of the stations that are closing, in terms of Front Counter, Craigmillar, a really, really big station in Edinburgh, through Fife are seeing significant downsizing and the closing of what were 24-hour stations. So in terms of proportionality, if I can reassure members that in terms of what's happening elsewhere in Scotland, we don't have the thin end of the wedge in terms of this locality, that it has been fairly left to divisional commanders in consultation with the review team to look at what is in the best interest based on what we have at the moment. So it isn't that we are being disadvantaged, if I can reassure you of that. There are other areas where they are equally being asked to make the same very, very difficult decisions about stations that are arguably, in terms of size and population, there's a greater demand on them, and they're being asked to either close their front counters or certainly downsize the timing as well.
You know, back in.
Do you suppose the other point I'm really keen to hear on the impact and future savings? Have we got any idea what that's got to look like in Dumfries and Galloway?
I would be lying if I told you that I actually know where we are heading to some degree. We've tried to, and even predating Police Scotland, when there was serious austerity issues coming in for us, is tried to be sensible in our approach, is to come to members with practical solutions to some of the funding issues. I'd like to say in the future there is this plan that is there for us, but if I'm being honest, we are in Police Scotland, we are dealing with what we have to deal with just now. The assurance I have been given is where the planning goes beyond the next 2 or 3 years, that we as divisional commanders would be cited on that, so that we could influence the decisions that are made. And be assured that I have made it very clear to the Force Executive of the views of this community in Dumfries and Galloway about the anxiety there is about closing front counters, but more importantly, if there's any suggestion at closing police stations, that before we even get to that stage, there must have been an alternative option made available and agreed with the community before we make that change. And please, members, be assured that I will keep saying that, so that we don't get to the stage where they are closing them without any alternative, and it would be with your consultation and discussion.
Thank you. I've got 5 more speakers on the counters, and then I'll finish up on that and move to the traffic wardens. I've got Councillor Wiper, Dempster, Carsons, Scobie and Geddes. Colin?
Thank you, Leader. Just a little bit of clarification from a point that was made maybe half an hour ago. I know you've expressed an interest in the Johnson School in Kirkcudbright if it becomes a community hub. So if you're committed to keeping Kirkcudbright Police Station open as a police presence, and you're also going to possibly have a presence in the Johnson School, how does that actually equate to a saving? Because I mean, the lady at Kirkcudbright, I take it, is retiring. If you do have a presence in the Johnson School, won't you have to pay a member of support staff to be in the school, and that really negates the saving that you're making by the lady retiring? And I would imagine that the same would happen in Dalbeattie. If you have a presence at a counter in the town hall, then you're actually paying a member of staff to come back on, if you follow me.
Forgive me, Councillor, I perhaps didn't make myself clear that The only time that we would potentially look at closing, for instance, Kirkcudbright in those circumstances would be if the arrangement at Johnston School was actually resolved, that we could then move our base from where it was into that base. The same would go for any alternative for Dalbeattie, which is to keep the police officers based there, but actually have a front counter that maybe shares with other people. So that's what we're engaging in some dialogue with. So it would be using that community hub and keeping that base within the station. So I wouldn't look at closing the existing station unless I had a base where people would recognise the police were based at, and that's where they were going to be. It's just moving venue.
The existing station would close totally. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, Councillor Dempster, John, 3.
Thanks, Leader. It'd be interesting to know what role the Scottish Police Board has played in this consultation exercise, and indeed what view they hold on the proposal being brought forward. And the other thing is, if you talk to police officers nowadays, they tell you it's difficult to get the public to support them, to bring forward issues, to make statements for court, etc. And it's often because the perception is the police are difficult to contact and the police are difficult to work with. And, you know, it's all about contact, and that's what you're saying, you'll try and maintain the contact. I don't know when I last saw a police officer walking the streets in Sankert at night or weekends, and I'm sure that's no unique. I can see them driving by and I can make contact with them, but it's not the same as a conversation when you can glean information from members of the public, and that was the old style policing that's maybe no regarded as appropriate nowadays, but I think it is. And earlier the issue about a telephone outside a police station was raised, and you said it may be something you look at, and in my view is that that should be an essential, that there should be a means for the public to make access to a member of civilian or police staff with an issue they're raising if they present themselves at a police station and there's no one there. They've made an effort to get there. That should be recognised and given some support or mechanism to ensure their views are heard. I think it's also a shame that there's any charge in the 101. I don't imagine it's reasonable in the slightest for someone who has limited resources, financial resources, to make a value judgment of whether or not they should report a crime. If they're able and willing to report a crime, that should be a free service that the Police Scotland pick up to ensure that members of the public are not compromised in exercising their civic duty. And anything that's changed, there should be either an infrastructure or a reporting mechanism put in place before that change is implemented. That's certainly the view that I have, Chair.
Do you want to comment?
I'll take the last bit first and then I'll come to the SPA. I absolutely agree with you that before we switch anything off, we should have an option or alternative that we have shared. I take cognizance of the points that you make in terms of members of the public finding it hard to get in touch with us, particularly in vehicles, and you're probably speaking to somebody who joined when Beat Patrol was actually part of your duty. I think demands and the significant demands placed on officers to be more mobile in terms of the rural areas just continue to grow just because of the rurality of Dumfries and Galloway. But I'll certainly take away the point about visibility in terms of foot patrols that you're not potentially seeing in Upper Nithsdale. In terms of the SPA, clearly the board will be advised of they get the same notification. They will be advised that it's in consultation, and what they will deal with are the comments and the final consultation that comes from Police Scotland. That's who have got to sign off ultimately the proposals as they move forward and make sure that the due process has been followed. And I know that they are keenly overseeing that process, as you can imagine, whilst there are many other councils meeting, having exactly the same discussions across Scotland. I am aware that SPA are being kept updated on the progress of this consultation.
Thanks, Kate. Thanks, Leader.
Thank you, Finlay.
Thank you, Leader. I think this is the thin edge of the wedge, and it's going to lead on to more job cuts. we've already seen that today because we're supposed to be discussing public counter services, and we've already touched on closure of Kirkcudbright Police Station and other police stations when that becomes an option. And it would suggest that if the police station along the courthouse was to close in Kirkcudbright, we're then looking at more centralisation of the police force, and I think that's a backward step. There's already, and I'm not saying it's necessarily right or wrong, but there's certainly a public perception that centralisation of the police force has already led to far more incidents of the armed police squad having to be called on to various incidents across Dumfries and Galloway, and the costs involved in that, where possibly some local knowledge would have stopped that actually happening. Job losses, I know we're maybe not looking at individuals excuse me, losing their jobs, but people retiring or moving on and their positions not being replaced, there are job losses to Dumfries and Galloway. These jobs will no longer be there. So, we're maybe not looking at individuals straight away, but ultimately that does result in civilian jobs being lost. Back again, probably half an hour when you were discussing the different options for people to approach the police. Well, any reduction in an option for the general public to approach a police officer has got to be a bad move forward. Not everybody likes a police car arriving at their door and police officers walking up and banging their door for whatever reason. So to reduce the opportunity for the public to actually to go into a police station is not something to be welcomed.
Would you like to comment?
There was quite a few things there, sorry, I just need to look at the... more centralisation, obviously you'll not be surprised to know that I would resist that, but it is a restructure of a new organisation, so there are going to be views that that's how it feels, and we will do as much as we can to try and mitigate that perception, but there will be times where that's exactly how it feels and perhaps exactly how it is. In terms of the ARV, for members who were on the former police committee, they'll have heard me say this before, that if you'd asked me, we would have reached this position anyway with Dumfries and Galloway Constabulary. Being a firearms commander, I believe that you need to have the ability to use the most appropriate tactics to deal with the most difficult situations. And whilst that, in the face of it, looks in conflict to where we were before with Dumfries and Galloway Constabulary, I'm quite sure we would be having exactly the same conversation if we hadn't moved to Police Scotland, and you would have seen much more activity in terms of that ARV, because when you do have that resource, I would have to say, you charged me with the responsibility of keeping people safe. To do that, I must be able to employ every tactic that's available to me if it's proportionate at that time. So I think that's why you're seeing probably a lot more of it. And to be honest, I would have used it more in the past. It was just the views at that time where we didn't have one. Therefore, we were always calling out bigger teams, and therefore a lot of issues were getting resolved at a different time. So they were there, so I probably don't apologise for that, because I think it's a tactic that's valuable and ultimately will keep us all safer from those incidents that actually merit the use of the ARVs. And I absolutely take on board all the points you make about that local connection, local knowledge and local engagement, and absolutely that's what we are trying to make sure that we don't lose, albeit that the loss of or the closure of front counter provision may actually have that, so I need to try and mitigate that. The other thing I would say is we're not talking about we're talking about, if we're talking about closures of police stations, about the traditional police stations that are there. What I'm saying is there will be another police station. It'll just look slightly different, and it'll be working with partners, and it'll be with the police officers there. I have no intention of moving police officers out of their base team in Kirkcudbright or Dalbeattie. It's just that they would sit somewhere else, so we're looking at the provision for that. So closing, I would like to say transferring the police station from one building to another.
Willie?
Thanks, Ronnie. Just before the meeting started, Kate reminded me, from her time in Stranraer, I don't know how long ago that was, of the police stations that were in the Rins, and that was on Dromore, Sandhead, Kirkham, Portpatrick, Glenluce, and these are all rural communities that have lost out in terms of police offices and counter services that were there some years ago. So in respect to that, while we are talking about counter manning, opening and so forth, nevertheless to what Jill says, it's this public consultation and indeed an assurance from both Kate and Irvine that these communities receive a communication, if you like, by a visit from a police officer, and while Stranraer in the Rins area is not affected, then equally that Newton Stewart and front or backroom jobs, civilian jobs are being lost. That is a cut in public services and a loss of jobs. I would hope we can get an assurance out of Kate and Irvine that the communication will be maintained to community councils, etc., as a matter of course. And that we're not looking at this being affected because that is a means of communication, so be it it's not a counter service, it's that communication with the communities, and that we get that assurance as much as they can give it.
Do you want to come back on that?
Absolutely, Leader. Councillor Scobie, you absolutely have my guarantee that that's one of the areas of work where, as I've gone around in the last 6 months in Police Scotland, as I've given assurance that where there are concerns about the police attendance at community councils, please let me know. And that is one of the core duties of the community-based officers, is to make sure that they are attending that meeting and make sure that they are then in a position to give an update to their respective inspector or area commander, and ultimately me, about what some of the local issues are. So you absolutely have a guarantee from me.
Thank you. Councillor Geddes. Alistair.
Thanks very much indeed, Leader. It won't surprise you, sir, to hear me say that I share the very legitimate and indeed understandable apprehensions and concerns which have been previously expressed by colleagues on this issue. I would go back to the comments that Chief Superintendent made right at the start of her presentation, when she said, in fact, that this was not about closing police stations. And forgive the cynicism, Leader, but I turned to my colleagues in the corner here and said, not yet. And she also said, in fact, that it was not about centralisation. It was about having to effect economies to face up to the extremely challenging financial circumstances in which we live. Again, I would concede that point, but I think, Leader, de facto, that centralisation or increased centralisation may very well be the end product of that. And that's obviously a worry. What worries me even more, sir, is in fact that I see this as the thin end. The phrase has already been used, I think twice at least. This is the thin end of a very big wedge indeed. Because if in fact you're stripping out, you're closing counters, and inevitably you're going to be stripping out, Leader, civilian staff and administrative backup, call it what you will, that will lead to more duties, as Councillor McClung has already said, having to devolve on existing serving police officers. And the more they're having to do that, Leader, in my view, the less time they will spend on the street doing just exactly what police officers should be doing. So, as I say, worrying times at the moment, even more worrying times as far as I'm concerned, sir, lie ahead. What's also an issue, as far as I'm concerned, is that not only is this, being driven by, having to effect savings and effect economies, and I can understand, I'm sure we all in this chamber, Leader, can understand the rationale and the logic of that. But what worries me even more is, what Councillor Hislop alluded to earlier, sort of central belt mentality, if I understood him correctly, in looking at policing issues in rural Scotland. No less than the redoubtable Margot MacDonald MSP alluded to this and made reference to it in last week's press in relation to the actions of Police Scotland concerning an issue in our capital city. Now, that's nothing to do with me, and I don't intend to go into it today, but she did make the comment, in her view at least, that the way that matters were unfolding were redolent of the Met, and the Met on a bad day. And that, as I say, resonates, I'm sure, with more than a few of us in this chamber, and no doubt even in the wider policing community, though I'm not going to ask either the Chief Superintendent or her colleague to make any comment whatsoever on that. But to sum up, sir, as far as I'm concerned, apprehension, concern, and with the greatest of deference to Kate, and I've always found both lady and gentlemen to be people of integrity and professionalism. The blunt fact of the matter is that they cannot give us any assurances today as to what is likely to unfold sooner rather than later. So that's the reason for my concerns and apprehensions. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Geddes. That's the last speaker on the counters. I think, during that debate, I think it was worthwhile. I think it does show a lot of concerns being given by everyone from a wide geographic area, and we will now move on to the traffic wardens. Jill.
Thank you, Leader. I'd just like to draw members' attention to page 4, and in particular 3.4.6 and 3.4.5, and it's just, I want some clarification, please. It says in 3.4.5 that preliminary work has been undertaken on the implications of decriminalising parking for the council. And obviously there's a cost associated with that. And 3.4.7, 3.4.6, it says that it would cost an estimated £90,000 for that work to be carried out, with a start-up cost associated at £200,000, which is stipulated in 3.4.5. So already we're at £290,000 as a cost to the council if we were to carry out these duties. And then ongoing costs of £70,000 deficit every year thereafter. Can I have clarification that those figures are correct? Because that seems to be quite a substantial cost.
Thank you, Councillor Dykes. I think that is, before I bring Kate in, I think that is a great concern to everybody, and I don't think that's, I think these costs might rise, actually. So, there are substantial costs, I think they may rise.
I presume it's a cost.
Sorry, can I ask Stephen?
Yes, just in response to Councillor Dyke's point there, the report contains some early figures that we've been working on in terms of the implementation of decriminalised parking enforcement. We carried out a piece of work, a bit of modelling work, that we're just really kind of receiving these figures on, and we're still trying to digest them and take them on board. We're aware that obviously Police Scotland were looking at this as an option, and a number of other local authorities have moved towards decriminalised parking enforcement, and we were looking at considering the costs for this authority of moving to such an approach to enforcement of traffic regulation orders on street and off-street parking. The costs that we've indicated there, in terms of the modelling work that we've done, we've looked at the resource that would be required and the likely income that would be generated through the enforcement action in terms of infringement of the traffic regulation orders and the likely penalties that could be raised through that. And in terms of operating the system, we reckon that there is a deficit. The model's quite sensitive to the number of penalty charge notices that are raised and the number of staff that are employed in actually the enforcement action across the region. And what we reckon is that we have a deficit and an operating cost of about £70,000 per annum. We also reckon that the start-up costs in terms of putting a system in place for a move to DPE are about £200,000. And in advance of that, over an 18-month to 2-year period, there would be quite significant work required to our traffic regulation orders, and we've estimated a cost there of about £90,000 for that kind of project management work in terms of staff resource to get us to a point where we have an approved order from Scottish Government to move forward with DPE.
Jill?
Thank you. So basically, to reduce the cost to Police Scotland, it means an increased cost to Dumfries and Galloway Council, when legally under 3.4.3, the council doesn't actually have to do any of this.
The increased costs in taking over in terms of the regulation, I mean, we're aware that at the moment there's been, over a period of time within Police Scotland in this division, there's been a reduction in the number of traffic wardens. The estimate that we've made on the costs that are in the report before you assume probably a lift in that in terms of enforcement of on-street and off-street parking. The issue for rural authorities is that it's probably quite difficult to make a business case for DPE work on the numbers alone without other kind of factors to fund that. That the Central Belt, the Glasgows and Edinburghs that moved very quickly in the late 90s to DPE had enough of a volume of turnover in a confined space that the business case balanced, and that there was an income generated that covered the costs, and they could then use that income. For rural authorities like ourselves, and we've looked quite closely at South Lanarkshire Council in this case, they had looked at a similar model, and it is effectively the large area that needs to be covered results in a deficit in running the model to provide the service.
Back in, Jill.
Sorry, and finally, I am correct in saying that police constables, etc., have the authority to actually issue fixed penalty charges for this particular issue. So even although that we reduce the traffic wardens, actually the police have a responsibility and they could issue these fixed penalties anyway. So why would the council therefore in Dumfries and Galloway want to pick up a huge increased cost?
I don't want to speak in too much detail into it. Police Scotland are probably better placed to respond on what exactly they in law are able to do. My understanding is that the police will focus on, or Police Scotland do focus on kind of moving traffic violations. What we're very much talking about are stationary violations, and their traffic wardens are able to monitor those in terms of mostly on the on-street parking. They will also monitor, I understand, in terms of the traffic wardens, the use of disabled parking bays on off-street parking. In terms of the motivation or the objectives in the council in taking on such a business case, taking it forward, for some it is the ability to better control parking in particular areas, and for some it's the income that's generated from that can be used to supplement other parts of or enhance other elements of transportation networks. But with a negative, with a deficit in the business case, that wouldn't be the situation in Dumfries and Galloway.
Leader, is it okay if...
Sorry, I'm just going to bring Kate in on this.
Probably just on the last point about police officers, you're absolutely right. They have the powers to do that. The only issue I would raise is if they're doing that, they're not available for other things, and it's a case of priorities. I don't have sufficient people to do certain pieces of work, but what they will do is prioritise. So where it is dangerous, where there are inappropriate parking, we absolutely will continue. That would be the mitigation for this proposal that's going forward. So they absolutely have the powers. It absolutely is about road safety. There is no doubt about that. But again, it's about managing, for me, the competing demands. As you'll appreciate, I have a limited resource, therefore I must prioritise what that work is. But be assured that this would be an area of work that they would be challenged with, making sure that there was no diminution in service.
Thank you. Graham.
Thanks, Leader. We in the Strong Group, we've got reservations about withdrawal of traffic wardens across Scotland. This will have an adverse effect on traffic management in Dumfries, especially with various busy spells throughout the year. You've got galas, shows, ride-outs, and hopefully sometimes you get odd times you get traffic light blackout in Dumfries, but I haven't seen that for a long time. But the one thing that does concern me is disabled spaces will be parked on them, illegal parking, and we won't be able to get on top of that. But Police Scotland says they'll be able to cope with these things. But I don't know how many more cutbacks we can take under the Scottish Government. But Kenny McCaskill says he plans to recruit 600 more special constables to cover 180 hours a year. I'll believe that when I see it. I'm just wondering, is possibility that Police Scotland are going to be using special constables to carry out some of these traffic duties? I just wonder if, if Police Scotland can answer that.
Councillor Bell, I'm almost not quite sure how to answer that other than my immediate reaction is no, but obviously if they're on patrol with regular officers, which is the normal tack, they will deal with anything in the course of their normal duty. Am I going to assign special constables to be traffic wardens in another guise? Absolutely not. That would not be appropriate.
Councillor Smith-Colin.
I'm tempted to mention to Graham, since the new bloke took over as chair of PH&E, there hasn't been any traffic blackouts in Dumfries yet. So. I'm looking at Russell Weirs to assure me that will continue. Can I ask, though, specifically exactly how much Police Scotland will save based on the current provision of traffic wardens in Dumfries and Galloway? There are only a handful, but exactly how much will Police Scotland actually save from making this cut in Dumfries and Galloway?
We currently have 2 members of staff left, one at Dumfries and one at Stranraer, and their salaries will be collectively in and around between £35,000.
Follow up.
So basically, what we're doing is that we you know, in terms of the public penny and making savings in the public service in Dumfries and Galloway, Police Scotland are passing the responsibility effectively to local authorities, more or less. But in doing so, they're actually increasing the cost to the taxpayer, because for us to decriminalise it and put in place all the measures we would require would actually cost the taxpayer more money than Police Scotland are actually going to save in Dumfries and Galloway. And I think we should resist this change. We know that in practical terms, there is no chance that police officers are going to patrol the streets and actually carry out the same job as traffic wardens did previously. They may do it when it comes to traffic safety issues, but when it comes to on-street parking, for example, that's not going to happen. It'll be a free-for-all, frankly, in some of our town centres if we don't have traffic wardens there, and we'll be pushed down the route that's actually going to cost us money. So I just think it's a very short-sighted attempt to pass the buck by Police Scotland, quite frankly, and I do think that we should absolutely resist this particular option, because it will cost the taxpayer a fortune. And it's worth pointing out that in the local authorities that have decriminalised and gone down that particular route, I think most of them, if not all of them, have car parking charges in order to try to recoup the excessive costs of this. And frankly, that's not a route that this council is going to go down.
Just at one point, I absolutely take on board in terms of the local issue. In terms of Police Scotland, they estimate that it would save £2.4 million, which would go towards part of the overall savings. So that's across Scotland, albeit I take on board the points you make in terms of the impact on Dumfries and Galloway.
Thank you. Councillor Dick, Ian.
Thanks, Leader. If I recall correctly, when we were discussing the integration of the community policing services, wardens, community police and so on, included within that were traffic wardens. I understood at the time that because there was a legal process which was going to take a couple of years and has now come before us, that service would be included in it. And although I don't think the question was raised at the time, my understanding was that there was essentially a saving with multitask agency employees, which included traffic wardens. So I was was led to believe at that time that once we integrated the traffic wardens into that service there, it wasn't going to cost us much more. And we're now being presented with a report which suggests £200,000. Estimated staff cost to complete the process in order of 90. So why all of a sudden are we spending all that money to do something I thought was the core or the structure of which was in place?
Stephen, do you want to come back on that? Why is it looking like it's costing far much more than what it did previously?
I think at the present time, I caught part of the question there. I think in terms of the community safety team, I understand they're very much looking at the off-street parking amongst the other kind of tasks that they have, and that the parking function, that the looking at the disc parking primarily in the off-street was transferred into the community safety team so that they could do that when they're out and about doing the other kind of enforcement activities that they're involved in the kind of the community warden approach activities. In terms of why what we've put the figures in the report in terms of the modelling look more expensive, I mean, the figures that Police Scotland have just given us just now are effectively the kind of raw salary costs, I would imagine, plus the kind of on costs. What we're looking at in terms of the model for the DPE is actually getting back to a level of provision with, we reckon, about almost 6 full-time equivalent wardens, which is somewhere between what was used in the past as traffic wardens by the police to cover the region. I understand it was 8 down to 4, and then I think more recently down to 2. So we're looking at a level of provision that gives us that region-wide coverage principally in the built-up areas where we obviously have more traffic regulation orders to manage, but also in some sort of touring basis where some of the other communities can be picked up as well, and that there can be enforcement action there. So that's how we come to the kind of costs in terms of the start-up costs and the deficit to run in relation to the charges.
So we're running at 2 at the moment, and what we're proposing to do is to increase it to 6. Why are we not just simply staying at the level we're at the moment, given that the integrated service is dealing with the disc parking?
In terms of the model, we're looking at taking the complete function from the police in terms of the traffic regulations orders that we put out as a council, and we reckon that's a reasonable level of staff to run on that for the on-street and the off-street parking as well. I'm not sure how much time our community safety team spend on the parking enforcement issues, and I know that I would imagine at times their priorities are driven by more immediate concerns.
Councillor Witts, Alistair.
Thanks, Leader. A couple of points, one technical and one I'll be asking people to speculate, which they might or might not wish to do. The technical point is the reference to paragraph 3.4.4, where it refers to the fact that some authorities have already introduced DPE, and it says then further on the remaining local authorities would all have to go through the decriminalised parking process, and I read that as suggesting that they would have to be doing that simultaneously. And I was wondering why, presumably the ones that have already introduced DPE did not do it simultaneously, but now as a result of the fact that we're now under Police Scotland and the legislation requires all the remaining authorities to do it at the same time. I'm not quite sure in reading that paragraph. And my second point is, and it's to some extent been covered by Colin, regarding revenue and cost. I presume there's start-up costs, but subsequent to that, the revenue comes to the local authority. Is this an incentive for people to maybe try and recoup their losses by means of fines? My brother-in-law in Edinburgh tells me horrific tales about the blue meanies who patrol the streets and are ready to pounce on anybody when 10 seconds has elapsed when they're over their time. I would ask if Edinburgh has introduced a DPE and whether that is maybe a way that local authorities are very much tempted to recoup any losses they have incurred from introducing DPE.
Alex, do you want to answer?
A couple of things from Councillor Witts. Yes, Edinburgh have introduced DPA. That's why you don't see traffic wardens in Edinburgh. You see what you call the guys with the blue hats on. They've done it. There are 11 authorities in Scotland, across Scotland, who have done it, and 2 are going through the process. It is not mandatory on a council to implement it. What you're being told is that if this goes through, this proposal goes through, the police will withdraw the traffic warden provision across Scotland and leave the local authorities to determine whether they want to use decriminalised parking or not. You're also getting a comment from the Chief Superintendent that the police will still have an obligation to police parking offences while they remain a crime, but the issue is what priority will that be given? I hope that answers the question, Councillor Witts.
Do we come back in?
In part, Alex said that police would withdraw traffic wardens across Scotland, but that would only be as a consequence of all the remaining local authorities going over to DPE. You're shaking your head. Sorry, I may be a bit dense this
No,
morning.
sir. No, sir. There is the Police Scotland do not have the power to force you to go down the road of decriminalising parking offences. What they're telling you is that they will only attend to traffic, non-moving traffic offences when priorities permit or when there is an absolute issue there. They are not forcing you to go down the decriminalisation route. A number of local authorities have chosen to do so, and you've alluded to perhaps the reasons why they've done it. I don't know. It may be that they have greater traffic problems in the likes of Edinburgh and Glasgow than we do in Dumfries and Galloway.
Councillor Wiper, Colin.
Thank you, Leader. I have to say I would agree with Councillor Dykes and Councillor Smith that we should resist this. I cannot see why, when we're looking around, scraping around to try and save a few £1,000 here and a few £1,000 there, why we would want to be spending more money on something if we don't actually need to do it. If we've only got, and if we do have to go down that road, or if we do decide to go down that road, why would we want to have more? If we've only got 2 traffic wardens at the moment, why would we want to employ 6 or 8 and increase the money we have to spend on that? I mean, if the police are getting by with 2 just now, why would we want to actually have 6 or 8? I mean, we should be doing the very minimum, especially with the amount of savings this council has got to make over the next 2 or 3 years. I mean, Kirkcudbright, as far as I know, has never had a traffic warden. I mean, we've got some lovely parking scenarios, but we seem to get by without somebody with a yellow hat on. So I would say do either the very minimum or not at all. That would be my view on the matter.
Thank you. Rob?
Thanks, Leader. I was kind of setting out in this not to make any sort of political points at all, but I've been kind of good lately, and I'm not really allowed to fight with Councillor Smith anymore either, so if you'll maybe just entertain me for a minute. I mean, we've heard from the interestingly titled Group of 7 who don't seem to care for Kenny McCaskill or the SNP very much. Not that they mentioned to that much of that to us when they were with us, but nevertheless, they don't seem to like what's going on. I think we maybe want to inject a little bit of perspective here. It's worth bearing in mind that the Tories actually do run policing. They run it in England and Wales, where we've seen thousands of police officers axed. Thousands. And probably the biggest assault on pay, conditions, pensions that there's been in years, decades perhaps. I mean, it's got to the point where the Police Federation of England and Wales, which I have to say you wouldn't necessarily consider to be a particularly radical organisation, is balloting its members to look for the right to strike. All of this under the watch of, assuming that the strong group of 7 are still members of the Tory party, of course, all of which is under their watch. I think perhaps we want to just inject a little sense of perspective here. I'm pretty clear that while what's going on is difficult, I have no doubt, there is no doubt in my mind who I would rather see running and looking after police in Scotland, and it's certainly not the Tory party. But of course, with ordinary luck, they're not going to have the opportunity.
Thank you for that contribution. Jill?
Thank you. Hope that wasn't an independence speech. I'm sure it wasn't. I just wanted a point of clarification, if I may. I wanted to know whether it would be competent to move a motion under this item, where I would like to move that under the duration of this council, we do not look at DPE. It is a legal requirement of Police Scotland to carry out these duties, and I would move, if it is competent, that this council does not look at DPE for the duration of the council.
I always remind members, Leader, that you need to have sufficient information before you to come to that conclusion. I think Stephen Herriot was quite forthright with members. He intimated that this was very preliminary figures. I think there are other issues that you would need to look at before you took that particular step. I think what I would suggest to members is that you look at receiving a much more detailed report on possible options and get far more detail regarding costings For example, there's been talk of the wardens who currently police your own car parks. They've got to walk along the street to get to the car park. I think this needs a wee bit more thinking through. I would respectfully suggest, Leader, that rather than take that decision today, you agree to receive further information before you make that decision.
Jill.
Thank you. I'm presuming that means it's not incompetent, but you suggest that we should have further information before we make a decision. It would be my take on that, because there are figures in this paper. If that is the case, I would be more than happy to move that we do get a further report with more in-depth figures so that we can actually make a decision on this.
Sorry, I've got Finlay first.
Thank you, Leader. I think Councillor Dykes covered my point, but I think this is right at the very start of this debate. Councillor Hislop suggested that we're having central belt policies pushed on rural areas, and I think this is a prime example. The police have a universal service obligation, and it would appear that where it's in the interest of councils to take over this, and the only way that can be in their interest is if there's actually a revenue benefit from it. I don't see any benefit at all in Dumfries and Galloway Council taking over the role that through their obligation Police Scotland should be doing.
Okay, Councillor Brody, Richard.
Thank you, Leader. So just concerned that how this will operate in the future. If we don't agree to take over the parking issue, which is going to cost us a lot of money, then how is it going to affect life in the community and how the police interact? To give you a specific example, there's a parking problem at the football club in Annan, not just on a game day, but because of the great success of the 3G pitch, there is a parking problem there, and because there's no traffic warden, the police is working very closely with the football club to work on this, and the police are doing a good job at the moment trying to enforce that. How will that change in the future?
Councillor Brodie, it won't change other than there won't be a traffic warden patrolling, that if there is an issue it's up to the police in terms of parking. If it's dangerous for other road users, it would be up to us to engage with the football club in future and thereafter make sure that there's some enforcement of the guidance that's there. It just wouldn't be a traffic warden that would be patrolling that street at that time.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Critters, McClung, Dick and Collins, and I'm finishing up with that. Ian.
Thanks, Leader. Just coming back to the point that we're actually discussing, which is the traffic wardens. What we haven't got within the paper is an alternative, if we don't agree with this today. So what I'd like to try and get through yourself then, Leader, is to what the response will be from the council in regards to this. Haven't heard much of that yet. I've heard a lot of comments and statements, but I'd like to get a clear understanding. How are we going to respond? Is that as a committee, as a council, through yourself? How are we going to progress this to make sure that we get the best outcome for Dumfries and Galloway?
On the traffic wardens?
On everything, but what I'm saying in particular in traffic wardens, what we haven't got is an alternative, because people are talking about, we shouldn't be doing this. What's the alternative? That's been proposed to us as a saving from Police Scotland. This is what the proposals they put forward in Dumfries and Galloway. What's the alternative? If we don't agree with that and that doesn't happen, what else is cut?
I think there'll be a further report coming back anyway on that. I think we've agreed to that. I didn't see any dissension when Councillor Dykes brought that up, so that won't be coming back with fuller information on that.
That was my understanding, Leader, but just for how will we actually respond to this as a council?
Councillor McClung, Jim.
Yeah, thanks, Leader. I'd just like a couple of pieces of clarification from both the professional police officers that are here and probably Mr Haswell. If the Chief Constable of Scotland decides that there are not going to be any traffic wardens, which is a distinct possibility, because to me that would be an operational matter in which councils have got no locus at all, we may be faced with a situation where the police no longer employ traffic wardens, I'm seeing from Kate that she's nodding. I am looking at Alec, and that would be the position. So we may be left without any traffic wardens. It doesn't matter what we say in here. So we are going to have to think of alternatives, and one of the alternatives is decriminalising parking, because if, no matter what we say, they may get rid of traffic wardens anyway.
Councillor Dick, Ian.
Thanks, Leader. Just to return to my earlier point there, that could make sure that the report includes full list of information on the use of the integrated service, because that certainly was my understanding at the outset, and obviously the training implications.
Sorry, I didn't pick up that last point there.
Just training and financial implications of using that service to provide parking, policing, if you like.
That'll be in the report, yeah. Councillor Scobie, as you haven't been in, I'll allow this. And I know I see your colleague is kind of sinking in his seat there, so.
I thought you had noticed me, Chair, but obviously not. But however, I think, you know, as it's been, as Alex said, we may need a further report. While we moved from community wardens to enforcement officers and having them multi-task officers, there is an issue there, and now that they're looking after car parking and monitoring car parking, there is an issue in terms of the community as to where they originally serviced, that they're not seeing the community wardens as often, if at all, patrolling the beat, if you like, for want of a better term, up in the communities. So as we decriminalise parking, DPE, and everything else, it's more taken away from what the original community wardens, which you and I both stood for and wanted to see indeed an increase in community wardens to be in the communities. So I think within the report, while we have changed it to enforcement officers, I think we've got to go back to what the original concept of community wardens were, and if indeed, as you give them more and more responsibilities that were taken away from that area, so they're integral to, you know, their original business that they carried out, the service that they provided. And I would like to see that in the report, that we get back to the prioritisation as to what the community wardens were about, and perhaps not community car parking spaces.
I think, not on the specifics, but I think the impact of, you know, doing this will be the information contained within the report. So without going into specifics, it will be on, you know, impact on that. Councillor Collins.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Scobie's question actually is answered in terms of the administration's document and priorities going forward. But I would like to thank Chief Superintendent Thompson today for the responses that she's given, and her colleague. But I would also ask whether or not the senior officers at Police Scotland would have any intention in coming to the council. I had the pleasure of attending a presentation from the head of traffic in Police Scotland and found that very helpful. But I think to emphasise not least the need for the consideration of those of us, particularly outside of the central belt, that to have the opportunity of putting our case, and for those senior officers to actually advise us of why they are shaping the service in the way that they are, and for us to be enabled to maybe influence that thinking. Is it the intention of those officers to visit the councils, and or would it be appropriate for this council to invite those officers to come along and have that discussion with the elected members?
Can I just ask a couple of points of clarity, Vice Chair? Is it in relation to this consultation or in the wider plans they may have for the development of Police Scotland?
I think the tone that has gone round the chamber here today would indicate that members would be very interested in being able to influence at an earlier possible time the thinking that's going on overall, not just specifically on this paper here today, but how we can inform and be informed with regard to the considerations and thinking that's going on centrally with Police Scotland.
I can certainly take that away from this meeting, and whilst you're obviously perfectly at liberty to make that invitation direct yourself, I'm more than happy to do it, having been at the meeting today, to ask them to perhaps come to full council. Would that be appropriate?
There already is a meeting with the leader and myself with DCC Fitzpatrick coming up, so before we invite them to a full council, it might be better if the leader is that meeting first. So that we can sort of set some terms of reference before they come. So there's a meeting already in the diary, leader, and I think that would be an opportunity for them for you to invite personally, then invite also to have a discussion to take forward the views of the council offline before we invite a member of the senior police force down here.
Thanks very much, Chief Executive. But as I say, I was present at a presentation from the senior officer for traffic, and he explained why, for example, there was a base for the motor cyclist Police Scotland force in Lockerbie and so on and so forth, the rationales around that. And I think that's useful information, for example, for members to have, but also the opportunity to feed in more generally to the thinking and considerations that are going on nationally, and the lack of consideration, I believe, that there is in the wider context outside of the Central Belt.
Thank you. I'm going to indulge Councillor Dykes again for the last speaker. I said Councillor Collins was, but...
Thank you, Leader. Thank you. Just very briefly, I see on page 21 of 26 it says that the proposal is to withdraw traffic wardens across Scotland. Can I just be clear about something? If hypothetically, if I was to park my car in an area that said 2 hours on-street parking or half an hour parking slot, if I'm not causing a danger to the public, because that's what it says here, or an obstruction, then there would be no charge brought against anybody? That's what it says in this paragraph. Is that correct?
I would anticipate that you would expect the focus of police officers to be about dangerous and the safe route through. Therefore, if the vehicle is parked safely but in a 2-hour waiting zone and it's been there 6 hours, if I'm being blunt, it would not be a priority for my staff, because what they have to ensure is the safe flow, and the road safety priority would always go first.
Thank you.
I think that message came through loud and clear all through the debate. But Stephen, definitely the last one.
Thanks for your indulgence, Leader. I mean, it's good that we've had this discussion. Obviously, I think the whole DPE issue is actually a bit of a distraction for what we've been asked to do, which is Police Scotland review of traffic warden provision. That's just a role of officers that are employed by Police Scotland. And as it says in 3.42, it's anticipated by Police Scotland that any risk can be managed through the use of existing police resources. Now, that's a challenge for Police Scotland. The whole DPE part over the page really is a matter for the council to think about in its own right. And obviously we've not decided to do that yet. Some authorities have, we haven't. And that's a matter for us to do in our own time. But in terms of our response to Police Scotland, I would suggest that we take on board everything we've said here today, and also our concern would be, can we ask that police officers are still able to maintain the level of traffic policing that they carry out at the moment? Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. I think the importance of this subject and having indulged people quite freely on this, because it is an important issue for the Dumfries and Galloway. But I think just now we'll finish up the debate. We'll go to the Alec to sum up if members agree. I've got 2 pens here that we run out.
Thanks, Leader. I think if I can deal with the first issue first, which is the police counters. I think the main issues that I've picked out, and there are many of them, and I'll pick it up and consult you on that on the response. But the main issues I've picked out, this is not really a consultation document. This is us being told what's going to happen. The application of central belt policies in rural areas, one size fits all, is not going to work. The geography of Dumfries and Galloway, the distances between the manned stations, particularly in relation to the Newton Stewart on the A75 and the so-called spine of police stations, manned police stations across Dumfries and Galloway. The loss of local contact between the police and the public is the wrong message at a time when the police are trying to increase their own visibility. There were concerns expressed for future savings, a specific issue on the 101 number. The Council are seeking assurances that local commanders will continue to work with local communities to mitigate anything that comes out of the closure of the manned stations, raising visibility, Police Scotland continuing to deal with community councils, etc. And specifically, we're seeking an assurance that the alternatives will be consulted on and put in place before the changes are made. In terms of the traffic warden provision, I think while only 2 or 3 members actually stated it, this council is not in favour of the removal of the traffic warden provision. You will make that point, Leader, in the normal way. However, members are seeking a further report from officers in relation to DPE, and that will come to a future meeting for consideration. I think that was the 2 basic things on the traffic wardens.
Okay, if we can go to the recommendations, and if we've considered it and I've asked Alec to sum up the key points, and could we agree to submit a response from the Council based on these points? Councillor Covers.
Okay, thanks very much, Leader, for letting me in. I think it's important that we do, and it goes out in your name, but Councillor Smith brought up some very relevant points I was going to bring up myself, and I didn't pick up on them. This in real terms looks like a further cost, a higher cost to the taxpayer. So I do think that should be in there at some point.
That'll be there. That'll be in the letter.
Can I just ask that when you do send that letter out in your name, if that's possible, that all of the members get informed of that, please?
No problem. Councillor Geddes.
With your leave, sir, can I ask, in addition to, and I have no problems with Mr Haswell summing up, let me say that for the record, sir, but can I ask that in addition to all 47 members getting copied into the correspondence, that we get a position statement, for want of a better term, out as a matter of urgency to all community councils in Dumfries and Galloway, because I know that certainly in a mid-Galloway context, this is an issue which is exercising, and rightly so, community councils in that area, and it would be helpful, I would suggest, sir, in fact, if they could get some idea as quickly as possible of what take the council have in these issues. Thank you.
Yes, we will do it, and it'll also be in the press. Okay. Moving on to item 4. This is appointment to roles and outside bodies report. As members know, it was agreed at the last full council meeting to receive a report on appointments to outside bodies. It's common sense to consider outside bodies after a change in administration members. However, I am also keen that in determining the positions on outside bodies, we involve as best we can all groups. Most of the positions today are strategic bodies where historically the administration takes a lead. However, I would remind members that there are over 110 outside bodies with almost 200 positions to be filled, so there'll be plenty of opportunities for everyone to be involved in it, play a role in an outside body. The positions we have today are those that full council appoints in accordance with the council scheme for representation on outside bodies. but also urgent appointments to outside bodies where the appointing committee is not full council. Firstly, can I ask members to agree to withdraw delegation as appropriate from the Planning, Housing and Environment Service, Social Work Services to enable us to consider the recommendations set out in the report. On your desks, you have a list of the administration's proposed recommendations. I won't go through them all one at a time, you'll be pleased to know that, but I'd like to highlight a number. In relation to COSLA, on page 3, you'll know that the current position the Council has is that all 4 members come from the administration. However, I would propose instead that we share those positions between the administration and the opposition, with 1 member each from Labour, SNP, DG Conservatives and the Independent. On page 5, I propose that John continues in the role as a member of Scotland Excel. That's not just probably because she's the only one that knows where it is. But I know she has a keen interest and indeed a qualification in procurement. The role of events champion was previously filmed through PHES. Given it was led by that department, it may be that in November members will agree an events strategy at Policy and Resources Committee. So we have proposed the chair of PHES, who is also a member of Policy and Resources, for that role. I am, however, conscious that Finlay has been carrying out the events champion and is a regular at Palmerston who likes major events. So I think it's only fair that he remains involved in those events he has supported recently, and we will ensure that is accommodated. If the members have had a chance to look through the list, can I ask if there are any other nominations for appointments to those bodies contained in the appendix? Councillor Crothers, Carden.
Hi, thanks, Leader. A note from this that my name's down on the Dumfries Prison Visiting Committee, and I have been a member for the last year or so, which I have enjoyed, but I have handed my resignation in and no longer wish to have that appointment. Thank you.
Thank you for that. No other nominations?
Can I nominate Councillor Prentice?
Okay, we'll look at that offline anyway. Okay. Councillor Prentice.
Sorry, guys. In the West Transfer on page 6, there's a place for an independent group member. I would propose that Richard Brodie be in that. He's been in that before. And the substitute with Jim McComb for that position.
That's fine. Okay, can we agreed? Agreed. Okay, if we turn to item 5, which is the...
Yeah, Chair, I thought you were dealing with this in 2 parts. If you don't mind, there is a report here on committee structures or committee places. I assumed that was the same item 4. On that, you have got a Scrutiny and Performance Committee membership.
Sorry, that's just an information note. It's went through the last council.
It's only for information, Chair. It reflects a 9. I take it we're still coming back to the size of committee and the minimal numbers and the involvement of all members.
Councillor Dykes.
Sorry, Leader, it actually was a question on the information that's in front of us, but I'm happy to talk to you offline if you'd rather.
That's fine. Sorry, item 5, appointment of Vice Chairman of the Scrutiny and Performance Committee and Chairman of the Nithsdale Area Committee, Provost of Dumfries and Galloway. This report advises members of the Vice Chairman of the Scrutiny and Performance Committee. As you know, it was agreed at the last meeting that the post be filled by a member of the independent group. The report also covers a vacancy in the post of Chairman of the Nithsdale Area Committee, Provost of Dumfries and Nithsdale. David McKee is obviously too modest and has indicated that he doesn't wish to be in the limelight, so has asked that another member carries out the role instead. On the recommendations, members are asked to note the appointment of Richard Brodie as Vice Chairman of the Scrutiny and Performance Committee and to appoint the post of Chairman of the Nithsdale Area Committee, Provost of Dumfries and Nithsdale. I'd like to nominate Ted Thompson to the post of Chairman of Nithsdale Area Committee and Provost of Dumfries and Nithsdale.
Happy to second.
Are the members happy to accept those two recommendations? That's fine, thank you.
Right.
Councillor Green, Jack.
Thank you very much. It's nice to see that another member of Including Primary Schools taking up this role, and let me be the first to congratulate you, Ted.
Okay. Councillor Thompson, Ted.
Thank you for your indulgence, Chair. I'd just like to respond to Councillor Groom and thank him for the very hard work that he's carried out as Provost of Dumfries, and I hope that I can lean on his experience in that role for any help I might need.
Absolutely, no problem.
Thank you. I have no other business for a decision, so thanks members and thanks for the patience.